First, I'd like to introduce Dr. Roderick Shaner. Dr. Shaner is Medical Director for LICDMH, so Los Angeles County Department of Mental Health, and also Dr. Peter Curry. Dr. Curry is with D.D. Hirsch Mental Health Services as the CEO. D.D. Hirsch, as we will find out, provides a lot of services here in your county. Thank you, Dr. Curry, for coming. And now let me bring up Mariel Hemingway. Mariel, what a fantastic job you did. And Dr. Mariel is awesome, and I know probably the first question people want to know is when can they see that and where?
It is, as you saw, that Oprah Winfrey is the executive producer. So, but prior to it being on the OWN network, it's going to get a theatrical release. We hope by the end of the summer, early fall. They're negotiating that. I don't know what that means. But it will be out in theaters because I think it's really important that it gets kind of a push everywhere, and then it will show on the OWN network. And then, like I was saying in the clips, I would like to see it be in schools and hospitals and rehab centers. I think that it can be. I think it can be helpful.
Absolutely. Let's just take a quick moment to talk a little bit about, for example, what does D.D. Hirsch do?
Well, we provide services in LA County for all ages, education, community outreach, services in the schools, and outreach to the homeless, sort of residential care for women with substance abuse problems. But probably most pertinent to tonight is that we founded more than 50 years ago, the Los Angeles Suicide Prevention Center founded the first 24-hour crisis line, and there were some amazing men who decided they wanted to learn everything they could about suicide and do everything they could to stop it. And so it's grown to now where we're taking more than 50,000 calls a year on our crisis hotline, and we have groups all over Los Angeles County and Orange County in many languages for people who have lost someone to suicide. And one of our more, a very unusual service that we provide are groups for people who have attempted suicide, because I am a mental health professional, and mental health professionals are afraid of suicide. They don't want suicidal patients. And so to create a place where people who have attempted suicide can come and talk about it and feel that it doesn't have to be a secret is a step in keeping them alive.
And so, Dr. Shaner, the LACDMH, you obviously fund Proposition 63 programs. Tell us a little bit about the programs.
Actually, we're really happy that Prop 63 funds our program.
You yeah, I got it back.
We'd love to give money back.
So sorry, yeah, Prop 63 funds for LA.
But we are really, we get a lot of benefit from Prop 63 in a number of ways. As a mental health department, we spent most of our existence being the safety net, and as such, we treat people with very serious mental illnesses, many who have problems that do lead to suicide, and so a big part of our services involve doing treatment that hopefully decreases the chances of suicide in that population. But more recently, with Prop 63 and the way that it's structured, it's given our department the opportunity to reach out to do more activities that involve prevention and early intervention, which is really one of the key areas where we can intervene to both prevent suicide and help give people the kind of lives that don't lead to those sorts of problems. So in the last few years with Prop 63, we've had a new opportunity to do things like programs like Partners for Suicide Prevention. where we can have a team of individuals that work to help educate many community groups, many entities to do things, simple interventions that help identify people who might have suicidal thoughts and to intervene in ways that are useful and far earlier than times before where we had to wait till people had severe kinds of mental illnesses.
So let's bring this back around to Mariel and tell us about making this documentary. What was it like for you?
It was wonderful. It was scary. It was. What was interesting about it is, you know, I've been an actress for many years, and I've been in film and done these things, and you know, you speak publicly a bit, and. But doing a documentary is really about being yourself, and it's not about hiding behind a character. And I really initially just, I was hesitant. My best friend, Lisa Erspamer, who was an executive at the O Network, came to me and she said, I really think that we have to tell your story. I was like, what are you, nuts? My family's crazy. And she said, that's the point. And I said, you know, and I said to her, I said, I just don't want this to be a horrible reality show. You know what I mean? Like, that it just shows people like a train wreck and you just don't want to watch it. Because, you know, we live in a reality show world, and I feel that that is such a misrepresentation of the truth. And I wanted to tell the truth, and I figured if I was going to do it, that had to be, you know, the core issue, or the core message of it was the truth about my family. And so Lisa said, well, Barbara Koppel's interested in doing this. I thought, oh, well, that's a whole different story. She's a filmmaker. She makes films, and she had such an amazing viewpoint on our family. And I met with her after Lisa said, you know, Barbara wants to do this. So I met with her in New York City, and I just loved her. And she knew more about my family than I did, which was a little freaky. Wow, I didn't know that. And so I was so thrilled to be in the hands of somebody who was really an artist, but she has such a powerful way of like telling the truth, but also like saying things that are hard to say, you know. And she said to me in our first meeting, you know, are you going to be open with me? And I think by the end she was like, okay. You've told me too much. Please be quiet.
So did it bring up some tough feelings though for you?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you know, when I decided to do it and I really made the commitment, I said, you know, I made a pact with myself that I was going to tell the truth. And that doesn't mean that you sort of tell the truth. It's like being partially pregnant. It's just possible. You either tell the truth or you don't tell the truth. So when I decided that I would really tell the story about my family, I knew there would be moments where it would be really, really difficult. Because, you know, there's things that I had to speak about that kind of exposed my family in a way that I was scared to do, and I didn't want my family to look bad, you know, because of it. And but I feel that Barbara was so talented and makes it very, she just does it with such grace and beauty.
Well, just what we saw was very powerful, so I can just imagine what the entire documentary is going to be like, and I really look forward to seeing that. Tell us a little bit about your relationship with Margot.
Margot and I actually didn't have a very good relationship, and that was one of the harder things to speak about in the documentary when I was being interviewed by Barbara, because we just didn't have a good relationship. I was in a movie because she actually recommended me, which I couldn't believe, because from the moment I was born, Margot didn't want me around. You know, she was 7 years older, and I was a mistake that came, and, you know, she was the baby, and all of a sudden I showed up, you know. And she just didn't want me. She dropped me on my head when I first got back from the hospital. She knocked my teeth out with a baseball bat when I was 4. Now, and I don't want you to think that my sister was an evil person. She was a little kid. She wanted her position back. but our life, even in the very beginning, was just, it was tense. There was an issue and there was competition, and I think that happens with siblings often. And people don't want to talk about the fact that not always are our relationships with our siblings great. And it didn't help that I was in a movie that she recommended me for, which was kind of amazing and wonderful and kind and generous of her, which I realized later in life, to put me in a movie playing her little sister, Lipstick. And then when it came out, she got murdered by the critics. Just, it was horrible. They said such awful things about her, and she wasn't bad in it. It was just, you know, it's Hollywood. Like, they say nice things, and then they want to tear you down. And that was very, very hard on me, because I thought, oh, this is just not going to make our relationship any better. You know, even though I was 13 years old, I knew that this was like a bad omen. And it did. It made things much more tense, and as I continued to like get work and act, and she didn't work, and it was just awful. And then she drank more, and her, you know, she was in pain. But she'd been in pain for a long time, and what was really powerful about watching the documentary is that it really changed my perception of her, and it gave me such compassion for who she was and the pain that she went through. And I was so initially ashamed of myself for how I didn't see the beauty that she was, the you know, the light that she was. I was so judgmental for so many years because I was scared, and that judgment came out of my fear that I would end up like her, that I would, you know, that things wouldn't go well. And so when I watched the movie, I just, my heart just opened up, and it was really a powerful kind of transformation for me. I really felt that I understood her more, and it was a powerful journey.
You know, when I saw it yesterday and now seeing it again today, I was really struck by her comment when she was talking outside your grandfather's house, where she said that she understood what that would feel like. What were your thoughts on that?
Well, I had to, let me give you a little backstory on all the footage that they found. That was 43 hours of unseen, uncut footage that Barbara didn't tell me that she had. So when I'm speaking about the living room, or the kitchen and wine time, I think that I'm making it up part of Part of me is thinking, did they really have wine time? And did my mother really have her feet in the sink? And were the colors of my kitchen walls really that yellow? You know, I mean, I couldn't believe it, and she had all this footage. And that was a documentary that my sister in 1984 was trying to make about her grandfather, our grandfather, and about our life. Not about mental illness, but just about the Hemingway sort of legacy and this heritage and this great family. And she didn't tell me until I saw it in the end. So I was so utterly blown away by seeing that. And when she said those words, you know, I accept it, it was like a premonition, obviously. I mean, it feels to me, and when you see the film in its context, it's chilling. Because she says those words and you know, you just know. And you see it in her. You see that that was an acceptable option for her.
Oh yeah. And tell us, you never met your grandfather?
No, he died 4 months before I was born.
And when he first died, what was the public, how did the media cover it? What did they say happened?
Yeah, that's very interesting. They said that he was cleaning his gun and that it was an accidental death, which is what happened a lot in those days. And it, no, I didn't mean that you clean your gun and you got it. What I meant was, and I think you know this, they covered it up. It wasn't suicide. The great writer Ernest Hemingway couldn't have killed himself. Like, that was just not, it couldn't have been that. And what's really interesting is when my sister Margot killed herself, my father didn't accept it. We were initially told by the coroner that it was possibly an accidental overdose, but then we were told only hours later that it was a suicide. And my father when he heard that it was accidental, decided that that's the way it was, and he didn't move off that until he died at 77, probably 10 years later, and he never said that it was suicide, ever. He would not accept it, and I think I said it in the clip when I was at this dinner for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, hosting it. I got up on the stage and I blurted out that it was suicide, that my sister committed suicide, and it was, you know, I guess I need like cameras and like weird tension for me to like say stuff. But I admitted that it was suicide, and that was another sort of healing moment for me, and I think it's really important that we, you know, that we own that these things happen, and it doesn't make us bad, but my father just could not accept it.
So you're saying that even, how many years had transpired between her suicide and you saying that at the dinner?
About 10 years.
About 10
I
years.
waited till my, you know, I didn't say, I wouldn't have done this documentary and if my father was still alive. I probably wouldn't have done it if my sister was alive. I mean, for obvious reason, I just didn't feel, I didn't want anybody to get hurt by me telling the truth. I just didn't, you know, because they were from a generation that didn't want to talk about it anyway. So, and you can't make somebody, like, throw something in somebody's face that doesn't want to deal with it.
At the time of Margot's death, had she been exhibiting any unusual behavior before that? I mean, did you all, you said that, I believe you said something like, you thought maybe your oldest sister, of any of the sibs, your oldest sister would have been the one more prone.
My oldest sister, who suffers from schizophrenia and all those different illnesses, I was convinced, because I got the phone call. I was at my father's house, and I got the phone call that my sister had committed suicide. And it was so confusing. I kept saying, no, you must have the name wrong. It must be my sister Muffet. Do you mean Joan? Her real name was Joan. No, Margot Hemingway. She's in Santa Monica, California, and she has committed suicide. Or they didn't say, your sister was dead. And it just didn't make any sense. And so and here's what's interesting, because I actually had tried to recover my relationship with her quite recently before she committed suicide. I wanted to have a better relationship with her, so we were both trying really hard to, you know, have that relationship. And I spoke to her 2 weeks prior to her death, and she seemed really good. She was doing really well. She was, you know, doing yoga classes and really working on herself, and we talked about that. You know, she was really trying to get her life together, and that's what's really interesting about suicide, which I learned through making this film. At the McLean Hospital, I was involved in several groups that were dealing with suicide, whether their child committed suicide or a sibling or a husband or wife, and the interesting thing is, suicide makes so little sense. It's going to be 20 minutes of a bad day. If you're a teenager, it can be planned for 20 years. It can be, you know, it can be a strong mental illness going throughout a lifetime. It's a very interesting and complex thing, suicide. And so I think that my sister, you know, and after seeing the film, I realized how much pain she was juggling at all times. And I had never realized that. And I think that she just couldn't do it anymore, you know? And one thing I know about suicide, having had my own suicidal thoughts, is that what's very difficult about it is, and people will say, oh, it's such a selfish thing. You know, it's so selfish because they left me, or the thing that people don't understand about depression and suicide is that when you're in it, you think you're horrible. You think you're useless. You think you're really not, like, people would be better off without you. You actually believe that the world would function a lot better without you. And it's sad, but it's the truth for that brain that is in the imbalance. It's the truth for them. So to understand depression and understand mental instability, to understand the chemistry gone wrong, is really to understand mental illness and to really have compassion for those thoughts that feel real to the person that's having them. I've had them, they feel real. And so, you know, I have so much, again, so much compassion for those that suffer.
And Dr. Curry, that's why what you do with Dee Dee Hirsch in the suicide prevention and the hotlines is so important. Can you speak to that?
Sure. Is this on?
No.
Hold on, this mic isn't on right here.
It's red, so I don't think it's on. Maybe I can just speak loudly?
Oh, here, yes.
Okay. Takes a team. It's the we, right? Not the I. Well, first of all, it's a community, and you basically talked about this earlier, that suicide is a community problem, and that if we as a community talk about it, we can help, whether it's help ourselves or help others. And there's so much stigma that to tell someone that you're thinking that you are a horrible person and that your family would be better off without you, and then people are going to say, how could you be so selfish, or you just want attention. Well, yes, if you're in terrible pain, you do want attention. If society cannot bear to talk about it and cannot bear to hear you say it, you're left so very alone with your pain. And if it were a pain like a broken leg and you were moaning and groaning, people would be very sympathetic. So, I mean, the first thing is we have to be comfortable talking about it and accept how common this despair is. I mean, people think that teenagers die more frequently by suicide. That's not true. It's the middle-aged that do. But teenagers think about it and they attempt it far more. So we need to recognize that there is this pain. We need to teach people the warning signs, and we need to teach them how to respond. A lot of people are silent when they hear about suicide. And then the other end of it, if we do not prevent suicide, are the people that are left behind that do have all those questions, what did I do wrong? Why didn't I notice it? The what ifs, and have such a hole in their heart, because to lose someone, and I'm sure there are many people in the room, including myself, who have lost loved ones to suicide, friends, family, where you do afterwards, you have such regret that you didn't do something. And those people who lose someone to suicide are at higher risk. It may be partly genetic because of propensity to mental illness, but it's also because you have suffered a trauma. And so we, at all levels, need to talk about this trauma. I mean, now we're talking about the traumas that people are suffering in war, and we see how that leads to suicide. But there is something we can do, and I think that's the most important thing, is that people need to know that there are 24-hour hotlines that you can call when you're ashamed to tell anyone else. The fact that you can call someone. Also, you don't want to, if you have a therapist, you don't want to call your therapist at 2 in the morning. So there is so much we can do to help people that are thinking of suicide, people that have attempted suicide, people that have suffered the loss of a loved one, and then also all those around. Like if you're a hospital worker or you're a police officer and you are the person that comes, or when we now have signs up at the metros that advertise the hotline, because think if you're the person that's the conductor of a metro line and you see someone throw themselves in front of you. So it's a community problem, and we can do something about it.
Did Margot show did you know that she was full of despair? Had that been evident?
No.
No,
Which is really interesting, because it really had been quite a few years, because she had gone to Betty Ford and she was clean and sober for quite a few years. At least that's what we were under the impression of. But she had alcohol-induced epilepsy, so she was on epileptic drugs. She was on Klonopin and some other pharmaceuticals, and no, not that we know of.
Right.
I mean, I don't think that, I think she wasn't talking about it or didn't know who to talk to.